Good afternoon, everybody. It's Beth here for another Wednesday Wellbeing video. This week we're going to be looking at maintaining our well-being while the lockdown is being eased. When it all started back in March, I think most of us assumed that lockdown was just going to last a few weeks and then we'd be back to normal again. But we're now 4 months into lockdown, and we haven't yet got back to how things were. There's a lot of talk about the new normal, but I think the only thing we can say for certain about what the new normal is going to be is that it is going to be changing regularly, and that there'll be a lot of uncertainty. Most of us actually aren't that good at dealing with change or uncertainty, and will at the least be concerned, if not actually anxious. But there's other reasons in addition that could cause us to be anxious at the moment. There is the sort of ongoing threat to our safety. There's the confusing scientific opinions from different people about what is the best course of action to take in terms of easing the lockdown. There's some research being carried out that shows that 65% of us in this country are concerned that their mental health will be further impacted by the easing of lockdown, and 43% of us are apparently concerned about our safety in relation to the easing, and 12% of us are scared of leaving the safety of our own home. So there's genuine concern out there, and even if we're not expecting it to be a problem, if we've been socially isolating for 3 or 4 months up to now, it would be understandable and reasonable for us to lose confidence. And going from isolation into crowded spaces with lots of noise and busyness could just be overwhelming. Public spaces will look different, and there will be different rules, and the rules will continue to be changing. But while there are all those concerns, there is less of the virus around now. So if we follow the guidelines and the regulations, there should be no increased risk to our safety. There are some measures that we can take to improve our coping with the situation. All the previous advice that's been given about looking after our mental health and our well-being during coronavirus pandemic still applies. And if you go back to our week 2 wellbeing video, which I will link to in the comments, you'll see more about that there. And there were 5 key points that I went into then, which were to limit access to the news so that you're not being overwhelmed by the constant discussion of what's going on, to maintain social contacts, which are essential for our well-being. They may start to look different, our social contacts, but it's important to keep them going. To follow a routine or some kind of structure in our life, and again, our routines may need to change as lockdown eases, but there is continued benefit from observing routines. Look after yourself, so pay attention to self-care. Make sure you have times to relax. Make sure you're eating healthily and exercising and getting enough sleep. And hold on to hope. And there is plenty to be hopeful about. We have adapted and coped so far for 4 months in a quite unprecedented situation. So I really think that's an achievement worth celebrating. So that's just some basic revision from our week 2 video, and if you want to go into more detail on those points, as I say, I'll put the video in the comments. There are some things we can do in addition to help us through this easing of lockdown, and again I've found 5 points that might be helpful to consider. So number 1, take it at your own pace. It can potentially be too overwhelming to go back to our sort of pre-lockdown level of activity, especially if it's something we're concerned about. It's important to build up gradually to the changes in lifestyle, and don't feel pressured by other people to do things that you're not comfortable with. We're all at different stages of adjustment, and I've always been a little bit wary of making changes when the rules have changed, and it's taken me 2 or 3 weeks maybe to start changing what I'm doing myself. But I think it is important to challenge ourselves, even if we do very small steps, and maybe challenge ourselves to do something new, maybe every day or every other day, if we feel we can. So that might be something like meeting up with a person you haven't seen since before lockdown started, or going into one specific shop. But it's important not to beat yourself up if it doesn't go well, but at the same way to celebrate if it does, because these are achievements, and it might be helpful to write down or record somewhere what you have been doing, and celebrate your progress so that you can look back on how things have changed. Number 2, control the things that you can control. So we're not good at change and uncertainty, as I said earlier, but it's important to control what we can. We can feel powerless if we feel like we're not in control of anything. So ways that we can bring in some control to life is following a routine, as I've said before, and that may sort of change shape a bit, that routine, but as part of that, to plan how we are going to start doing things again, and think about the potential problems that you might encounter if you're out and about, and think about how to manage those problems if they occur. So you might want to rehearse the steps in your mind that you'll have to go through if you, say, go into a shop. So that might mean contactless payment, for example, or following a one-way system. And it might be that friends who've already been to that shop can prepare you for how it looks inside, and what you'll have to do when you get there, if you haven't so far been using shops. It's important to make sure you know the latest rules, and I'll put a link to the government website where the rules appear. You might want to make sure that you have a bag or a pocket that you where you can put the things that you might need when you're out. So a mask or a face covering of some description, hand gel and so on, tissues, anything you might need. And plan to have a technique to use if you maybe start to feel a bit panicky while you're out and about. So in the mindfulness video in week 3, I think it was, I talked about a grounding technique that can help when you're feeling particularly panicky, and that is to name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can smell, 2 things you can feel, and 1 thing you can taste. That will help you to coming back into the present moment and to focus on the here and now, so that you're not worrying about what might happen or panicking about what the situation around you. If you find a particular situation makes you nervous, like a particular supermarket, maybe try a different store or a different time of day if it's been too busy and you couldn't cope with it, for example. And ask friends local to you for recommendations and their advice about what they do and where they've been and when it's quiet. It might be that you're worried about wearing a mask. There's been a lot of discussion in the media about masks and whether or not they're helpful, and people saying that they can't breathe when they're wearing their mask. I will talk about masks more next week, because this is obviously a situation that people are concerned about. But it seems to be the case that most people, if they're struggling to breathe, it's more likely to be due to panic than to any difficulty with the mask itself. So you might want to wear the mask for a few minutes at home each day just to gradually get used to it, and maybe build up the time you spend wearing your mask at home. If it's a reusable mask, you must sterilise it before you go out in public, and you can do this by washing it in normal detergent or by ironing it with a hot iron. But planning your trip out and having planned for difficulties you might face will make you feel more confident about going out and more able to cope if something does go wrong. Number 3 on the list is focus on the here and now, and like the grounding exercise that I've already described in point 2, it's a good way to cope with uncertainty. Focus on getting through today or maybe this week, rather than focusing on the future and the big picture. You might find it helpful to watch that mindfulness video from week 3, and again I'll put a link in the comments. But the important thing is to focus on today and to focus on what you can do today and getting the most out of today with the resources that you have and within the rules. Number 4, get back to some form of social life again. You may have been meeting with friends online or via video calls, but I think it's important to push ourselves to reconnect, to get the support of our friends. And if we don't, and other people are getting back to meeting up, we run the risk of making ourselves feel more isolated than ever when our friends and family are getting out and about. And this is going to be a big issue for people who are still shielding. It might be that you're worrying because you haven't seen people for a while, and whether it'll be the same and whether your friendship will be the same. You won't be able to give them a hug, for example, if it's somebody that you haven't bubbled with, and things will be different from before. And it may be that you're anxious about whether they'll follow the rules of social distancing and wearing masks and so on. But maybe you can explain to people, send them a text message or a phone call beforehand, and explain that, you know, that you're feeling anxious and that it's important for you to cope with the situation, that they do those things. And I don't think that's an unreasonable request to make. And if you're feeling left behind, but you can't bring yourself to go out and do the things that your friends are doing, try and find ways for them to include you in what they're doing, for example, by video calling you when they're out and about, or maybe you could all gather for a socially distanced picnic in the park rather than meeting in a restaurant. Following on, but not unrelated to building up your social life, talk about your concerns with a trusted friend, with a helpline, with your GP. If you are struggling with anxiety, your GP should be able to help. But do keep talking to people, and it might be that if you talk to your friends, it actually makes it easier for them, because they might find out that they're struggling with things that they thought other people weren't, and you can find mutual support in that. If you find it difficult to talk to people, then you can do it by email, or keep a journal of concerns and specific worries that you have, and you might want to go back later on and consider whether they're justifiable concerns or not, and if they are, what action you can take to avoid or problem solve whatever it is that's worrying you. But I think what's really important through it all is to be kind to yourself and to others, and don't judge yourself or other people about whether they're struggling or not, whether they're feeling anxious or not. We are all different, and that's what makes us all special, is that we're different. None of us actually fully understand what it's like to walk in anybody else's shoes, and somebody who appears to be coping may well not be, and somebody appears to be not coping may well be coping much better than we think. It's very hard to tell, especially when we view people's lives through social media and they choose which aspects of their life they're going to show to us. And when I was thinking around this, I realised it's something that I've been doing, especially when I look at social media and seeing all the amazing trips people have been making and things like that. I've sort of thought, I'm not doing these things. Maybe I should be. But I think it's important, as I've said already, to go at your own pace, and to not feel pressured by what anybody else is doing or what anybody else is asking you to do. And don't judge yourself, and give yourself regular encouragement. Anyway, I hope you'll find there's something useful there. As always, it's some suggestions of things that may be helpful to you. It's not an exhaustive list, and it's not a list of specific instructions that you have to follow to the letter. You have to work out what's right for you. I will be looking at masks next week, and some of the science behind masks, and whether they work or not, but also how to cope with using them. As I say, this is something that I've observed people are quite anxious about and has been covered a lot in media, and not everything that appears in the media has been very accurate. But as always, do let me know any other subjects that you're interested in, or things that you're struggling with, and we can cover those things. But for now, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you again next week. Bye bye.